She was a successful businesswoman, living in Switzerland. He was a Samburu, warrior from the remote wilds of Kenya. They came from two completely different worlds. Yet when their paths crossed, something unexpected happened. She gave up all the comforts and the good life she had and chose to live with him in a small hut in the wild jungle, all for the sake of love. But what happened to them 37 years later? And what does their daughter look like today? Watch the full video to find out. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon to get notified as I upload a new video. Let's go on. There have been several remarkable stories of European women marrying African warriors. One well-known example is Gemma Burford, a young British woman who met a Maasai warrior named Leaser while volunteering in Tanzania. Despite facing language barriers and major cultural differences, the two fell in love and got married in a traditional Maasai ceremony. They went on to have two daughters, Lucia and Suzanne. However, after several years, their marriage came to an end, most likely due to cultural conflicts such as the Maasai tradition of polygamy, which Gemma could not accept. But perhaps the most famous story is that of Karen Hoffmann, born and raised in Switzerland to a German father and a French mother. Karen studied in the Swiss canton of Glarus and later pursued a career in retail. At just 21 years old, Karen opened her own clothing boutique selling bridal gowns and high-end second-hand fashion. By the time she was 26, she was already a successful businesswoman and was planning to open a second store. She had also been in a steady relationship with her boyfriend, Marco, for over 5 years. On the surface, everything seemed perfect, but deep down, Karen longed for something more exciting, something beyond the routine life she had always known. That's why she decided to take a vacation with Marco to Kenya, a beautiful African country, unaware that this trip would completely change her life. On their second day in Mombasa, they boarded a ferry. That's when Karen saw him. A tall, dark, and strikingly handsome Samburu warrior stood out from the crowd. His body was adorned with traditional jewelry, and he wore only a simple loin cloth. For Karen, it was love at first sight. She later described the moment as feeling like being struck by lightning. To her, he was the most beautiful man she had ever seen. Soon, she couldn't stop thinking about the mysterious warrior. I tried to understand exactly what was happening to me. My feelings for Marco suddenly vanished to the point where I barely noticed him. The Messiah had lodged himself in my brain, Karen later recalled. A few days later, fate brought them together again, this time at an open-air dance venue. Despite barely speaking English, Latinga managed to connect with Karen through warm smiles and expressive gestures. When Marco refused to dance, Liata confidently took Karen's hand and led her onto the dance floor. It was wild and unexpected, but Karen was thrilled. After just a few brief encounters and only a handful of exchanged words, Karen returned to Switzerland, but she couldn't stop thinking about him. Within weeks, she made a life-changing decision. She broke up with Marco, sold her clothing shop, her car, and nearly all of her possessions, and bought a ticket back to Kenya. Finding Ladada again wasn't easy. He lived in Barceloi, a remote village in northern Kenya, far from the usual tourist routes. But Karen was determined. She searched until she found him, and against all odds they reconnected. She confessed her feelings, and the proud African warrior couldn't resist the bold, charming foreigner. They spent the night together, and not long after, Karen and Latinga were married in a traditional Samburu ceremony. Karen left behind her modern life and moved into Latinga's family's manada, a simple hut made of mud, cow dung, and branches. There was no electricity, no running water, and everything about the lifestyle was completely different from what she had known. At first, everything felt like an adventure. She dressed in traditional Samburu clothing, learned to fetch water from the river, and cooked over an open fire. But as the weeks turned into months, the challenges of living in such a harsh and unfamiliar environment began to weigh heavily on her. Illness was frequent. She suffered from repeated bouts of malaria and dangerous infections. Still, she stayed committed to Laikata and tried to adapt. In 1990, she gave birth to their daughter, Napi, a moment of joy that made her sacrifices feel worthwhile. To help support her small family, she opened a little shop in the village, which quickly became popular with the locals. But soon new problems began to appear. Latinga grew jealous of the attention Karen received from other men in the village. He didn't understand that her interactions were simply business. To him, they looked like betrayal. His jealousy became overwhelming. He began verbally abusing Karen and at one point even claimed that their daughter wasn't his. The man she had once fallen in love with seemed to be fading before her eyes. She no longer recognized the warrior she had chased across Kenya. On top of everything, Karen struggled with one painful cultural difference: the Samburu tradition of polygamy. Latinga had the right to take more wives, and his family often reminded her of that. But for Karen, who had sacrificed everything to be with him, the thought was unbearable. One day, Karen quietly left the village with Naparai and flew back to Switzerland. She never returned. Later, in a letter to Latinga, she wrote, "I hope you can forgive what I am about to tell you. I am not coming back to Kenya. Our worlds are too different. I believed we could one day share the same world, but I was wrong." In 1998, Karen shared her incredible story with the world by writing her autobiography, The White Messiah. The book became an international bestseller, translated into more than 30 languages. In 2005, her story was adapted into a feature film that became a huge success, especially in German-speaking countries. Karen went on to write several more books and gained both fame and wealth from her extraordinary journey. Today, Karen is 65 years old and lives in Lugano, Switzerland. She continues to work, write, and speak about her experiences. Her daughter, Naparai, is now 35. She's a strikingly beautiful woman who owns a hair and makeup lounge in Zurich. She also works as a wedding stylist and makeup artist and has built a successful life for herself. When Naparai was 14, she and her mother traveled back to Kenya to visit Latina. It was the first time Naparai had seen her father since she was a baby. Despite all that had happened, the reunion was emotional and Latina welcomed them warmly. Karen wanted her daughter to connect with her roots and meet her father. Even though her parents' love story has attracted a lot of attention, Naparai has chosen to stay out of the spotlight.